He was sitting right across from her. And he couldn't say a word. Not about what was happening outside. Not about the crew that had quietly descended on his backyard while she was inside. Not about the ring that was waiting. Not about the question that had been building inside him for months. He just sat there, talking to her, laughing with her, recording a nearly 2-hour podcast episode with her, while on the other side of the curtained windows of his Kansas home, someone was turning his garden into the most important moment of his life. And the palms were sweating. The palms of a man who has played in 3 Super Bowls. The palms of a man who has caught passes in overtime in championship games with tens of millions of people watching. The palms of Travis Kelce, one of the most physically imposing, mentally unshakable athletes of his generation, were absolutely, completely, totally sweating. Because this was different. This was not a game. This was Taylor Swift. And he was about to ask her to marry him. This is that story. And almost a year after the proposal happened, now that the wedding is over and the gold books have been closed and "Just NT Married" has been spelled out in purple lights across Madison Square Garden, Travis Kelce is finally telling it. All of it. The nerves, the planning, the curtained windows, the walk in the garden, and the moment that changed everything. This is the proposal story. And it is even better than you imagined. Let's go back to the beginning. Back before the proposal, back before the engagement announcement, back before the ring was designed and the question was rehearsed and the garden was set up. Back to a time before any of this existed, when the whole thing was just an idea in the head of a man who had fallen completely, helplessly, and irreversibly in love. July 2023. Travis Kelce is sitting in the crowd at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri. Taylor Swift is performing the Eras Tour. And Travis has made friendship bracelets. Actual friendship bracelets, the kind that fans trade at her concerts. He has put his phone number on them. His plan is to get backstage and hand them to her directly. It does not work. Taylor Swift doesn't talk to anyone before or after shows. She has to protect her voice for the 44 songs she sings. The woman who runs the elevator, the person Travis thought was his connection, couldn't make it happen. He goes home with the bracelets and without a phone call. Now stop. Because this detail matters enormously for the proposal story. Because the very beginning of this relationship, the very first attempt Travis Kelce ever made at any kind of contact with Taylor Swift, ended in failure. He tried. He prepared. He showed up. And she didn't even know he was there. That's important. Remember it. 3 weeks later, Travis goes on his podcast, New Heights, which he hosts with his brother Jason. And he tells the story. All of it. The bracelets. The phone number. The failed backstage attempt. He says he was disappointed he didn't get to meet her because she doesn't talk before or after her shows because she has to save her voice for the 44 songs that she sings. He laughs about it. He tells it like a funny story, which it is. But underneath the funny story is something else. Underneath it is a man who went to a concert, made friendship bracelets, tried to get backstage, got turned away, and then felt strongly enough about it to tell millions of people. Taylor Swift heard it. She later described the moment she heard about the bracelets on the podcast. She said she found it, and these are her words, metal as hell. She meant it as the highest possible compliment. A huge football player, famous and accomplished and celebrated, making friendship bracelets and telling the world about his failed attempt to meet her. That is not a normal move. That is a brave, weird, earnest, fundamentally human thing to do. They started talking. Quietly. And then in September 2023, Taylor Swift showed up at Arrowhead Stadium to watch him play. She sat in a suite with his mother. She wore his number painted on her cheek. The cameras found her immediately and the world caught fire. And in that moment, everything changed. But here is what nobody could see in September 2023. Here is the thing that was invisible at the beginning of all the headlines and the sports rating spikes and the viral moments and the Super Bowl appearances and the Wembley stage entrance. Here is the thing that was impossible to know then and is only fully visible now, on the other side of the proposal and the wedding and the "Just NT Married" lights. Travis Kelce was already falling. From the very beginning. From the bracelets. From the podcast confession. From the September game. From every moment that the public could see, and from all the moments the public couldn't see, the private conversations, the dinners, the time that two extraordinarily busy and famous people somehow carved out to actually get to know each other, Travis Kelce was falling. And the fall was complete, total, and permanent. He knew it. Long before August 2025. Long before he designed the proposal. Long before he curtained the windows and asked a crew to set up the garden and bought the ring and held it in a room while she was in the other room recording a podcast. He knew. The question was never whether. The question was only when. And how. And how to make sure, beyond any possible doubt, that the moment was exactly right. Now let's talk about the ring. Because before the proposal could happen, a ring had to be designed. And the ring that Travis Kelce chose for Taylor Swift is one of the most specific, most thoughtful, most beautifully considered pieces of jewelry in recent memory. He worked with Kindred Lubeck of Artifacts Fine Jewelry. The centerpiece, an old mine brilliant cut diamond. This is significant. An old mine brilliant cut is an antique diamond cut that was popular in the 18th and 19th centuries, before modern cutting technology existed. These diamonds were cut by hand. They have a distinctive appearance, slightly different proportions than modern brilliant cuts, with a higher crown and a smaller table, giving them a softer, more romantic glow rather than the hard fire of a modern cut diamond. They look like something out of another century. Something that was made with patience and care and human hands. This was not an accident. Taylor Swift is a woman who has spent her entire career in deep conversation with the past. Her re-recorded albums are a conversation with her younger self. Her songwriting reaches constantly backward, into folk tradition, into country roots, into the literary and musical history she has absorbed and synthesized throughout her life. An old mine brilliant cut diamond, antique and handmade and slightly out of time, is the most Taylor Swift ring possible. The setting was gold. Simple, classic, enduring. Travis Kelce, the man in the white tuxedo at Madison Square Garden, chose an antique diamond on a gold band for the most famous woman in popular music. And he was right. He was perfectly, completely right. The plan. At some point in the summer of 2025, Travis Kelce decided he was going to propose. And he made a decision about timing that is, in retrospect, one of the most brilliant logistical choices in the history of romantic proposals. Taylor was going to appear on New Heights, the podcast he and Jason co-host together. The podcast that, in a very real sense, is where this whole story started, because it was on New Heights that Travis told the world about the friendship bracelets, about the failed backstage attempt, about the way he felt when he saw her perform and couldn't reach her. That podcast was the beginning. And now it was going to be the vehicle for the next chapter. Taylor had agreed to come on the show. It was going to be the Season 4 premiere, a big episode, a special episode, nearly 2 hours long. They were going to talk about everything. Her albums, her tour, her life. She was even going to announce her new album, The Life of a Showgirl. It was going to be, by any measure, a landmark podcast episode. And Travis was going to propose immediately after. The logistics of this plan are almost comically complex. Taylor was going to be inside the recording space. While she was in there, a crew was going to set up the proposal in the backyard of Travis's home in Leawood, Kansas. The windows of the house that faced the backyard had to be curtained, covered completely, so that Taylor couldn't see what was being built outside while she was inside. A garden was set up. Flowers. Roses. The kind of intimate, romantic outdoor setting that is the absolute opposite of a stadium or an arena or a Super Bowl field. Private. Personal. Something you could hold in your hands. And the ring was somewhere in the house. Waiting. Picture what this was like for Travis Kelce. He is sitting at a podcast microphone. Across from him is Taylor Swift, his girlfriend, the person he has chosen, the woman he has been falling towards since the bracelets and the podcast and the Kansas City game. And they are having a real conversation. A genuine, 2-hour conversation about real things. And he is participating. He is present. He is asking questions and making jokes and being himself. And the entire time, in the back of his mind, one thought. One loop. One sentence playing on repeat. I'm gonna ask this woman to marry me after this. He told Jason on the New Heights season finale, the episode released just days after the MSG wedding, the first time he'd spoken publicly about the proposal in any detail. He said it plainly. During that recording the entire time, I'm planning, I'm gonna ask this woman to marry me after this. Just sitting there. Across from her. knowing, planning, feeling everything he was feeling, and keeping it together long enough to get through a 2-hour podcast episode. Jason, for his part, confirmed later that he did not know the proposal was coming that day. He knew it was coming eventually, but not that day, not after this recording. He said about taping the episode with Taylor, "I've never been more nervous." Jason Kelce, who played 13 seasons in the NFL at the highest level, said he had never been more nervous than he was having Taylor Swift as a podcast guest. He didn't even know what was happening in the backyard. So Jason was nervous about the episode. Travis was nervous about the proposal. And Taylor was just there, present, being herself, talking about her life and her music and her tour. Having no idea that the windows were curtained because of what was happening outside. No idea that the palms of the man sitting across from her were sweating. No idea that the question was minutes away. The recording ends. The microphones go quiet. 2 hours of conversation, complete. The episode that will eventually become the most viewed episode in New Heights history ever, by a significant margin, finished. And then Travis Kelce asks a question. Not the question. Not yet. A different one. Do you want to go and just walk around the backyard and have a glass of wine? Taylor Swift told this story on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon in October 2025. She described the moment with a laughing recognition, because looking back, the invitation was so obviously engineered, so clearly a pretext. But in the moment, she didn't think twice. She said, I'm always gonna want to do that. Of course she said yes. It's a walk in the garden. It's a glass of wine. It's an evening in Kansas with the person she loves. Yes, obviously yes. And then they walked outside. And Taylor Swift saw it. The garden that had been set up while she was inside. The flowers. The roses. The intimate, careful, private, beautiful setting that Travis's team had built in the time it took to record a 2-hour podcast episode. And she understood immediately. She told Fallon, and then I realized exactly why all of the windows were curtained and why he was nervous. The curtained windows. She had noticed the curtains and filed it away as a small oddity and didn't think about it again, until she was standing in the garden and everything clicked into place at once. The curtains. The nerves she had sensed without fully registering. The way his eyes had been somewhere else at certain moments during the recording, even as his words were perfectly present. The garden in front of her. Travis Kelce got down on one knee. He had a ring. An old mine brilliant cut diamond on a gold band, hand carried through all the planning and the nerves and the curtained windows and the 2-hour podcast episode. And he asked. And the palms were sweating. He confirmed this later to Fox Sports journalist Erin Andrews. The palms were definitely sweating, he said, with the honest candor that has always been his trademark. I'm an emotional guy, so there were a few tears here and there. A few tears. From Travis Kelce. Kneeling in a garden in Kansas. Asking Taylor Swift to marry him. She held his face. That is the image from the engagement photos, Taylor's hands gently framing his face as she looked at him. The man on one knee in a garden of roses. The most famous pop star in the world holding his face in her hands. She said yes. And Travis Kelce, 3-time Super Bowl champion, one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history, the man with sweaty palms and tear-streaked eyes, described himself afterward in one word. Giddy. Giddy. He used that word. Not relieved. Not proud. Not excited, though he was certainly all of those things. Giddy. The word of a person who cannot contain their joy in any dignified form. The word of someone so happy that the happiness is running over. He told Erin Andrews, "It's been an exciting ride up until this day, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with her." And he said something else. Something that might be the most important thing Travis Kelce has ever said publicly. He said that Taylor Swift had brought excitement and a joy for life that made me a better man, made me a better person, and made me just that much more comfortable in who I am. Just that much more comfortable in who I am. For a person who is watched constantly, who is analyzed constantly, who has had every athletic achievement and every romantic development and every casual tweet and every podcast moment examined by millions of people, to say that someone has made you more comfortable in who you are is profound. It means the attention doesn't rattle you anymore because there is someone who knows the you underneath the attention, and that person chose you, and that choosing has steadied everything. Taylor Swift made Travis Kelce more comfortable in who he is. The announcement. Because the engagement happened in private, but the announcement was anything but. Travis's father, Ed Kelce, revealed later that the proposal had happened approximately 2 weeks before the news went public. So roughly 2 weeks after that garden in Kansas, after the ring and the tears and the giddy, the couple had been engaged for 2 weeks in private, just the two of them, holding the secret. 2 weeks. While the world speculated about their relationship status and their future. While fans and tabloids tried to read every public appearance for clues. While journalists filed stories about what the relationship meant for the NFL and for pop culture and for American celebrity in general. Travis and Taylor were walking around with a secret the size of a supernova, and they kept it for 2 weeks. And then, on August 26, 2025, they posted a joint Instagram post. A carousel of 5 photographs. The first photo, Travis Kelce on one knee in a garden. In a garden of roses. The same garden from the proposal. The photo that the entire world had been waiting for, without quite knowing it was waiting. And in the photos, 5 of them, each one slightly different, each one showing a different moment in the sequence of the proposal, you can see everything. You can see the ring. You can see Taylor's expression shift from the moment of recognition through the emotion. You can see Travis looking up at her. You can see her hands on his face. The caption read, "Your English teacher and your gym teacher are getting married." 8 words. The most retweeted, reposted, screenshotted 8 words in the history of celebrity social media. A line that manages to be funny and sweet and a little bit self-aware all at the same time. A reference to the dynamic between them, the wordy, poetic songwriter and the athletic, physical football player, that immediately crystallized everything anyone had ever intuited about their relationship. The post got 1.2 million likes in its first 10 minutes. 1.2 million. In 10 minutes. Not 10 hours. 10 minutes. 1.2 million. In 10 minutes. Not 10 hours. 10 minutes. The internet had an event. Swifties decoded the date, the photos, the caption, the ring. Sports fans reacted to Travis Kelce, who had always been beloved in football circles, with a new warmth, the warmth that comes from watching someone you've rooted for get the thing they clearly wanted. Entertainment journalists filed hundreds of thousands of words in a few hours. And Taylor Swift went on The Tonight Show in October and described the whole thing to Jimmy Fallon while wearing the ring and laughing at the memory of how perfectly Travis had set it up, how he had used the podcast as the cover for the real event, how the curtain windows had been the tell she didn't read until she was already standing in the garden. It was the best possible case scenario, she told Fallon. The best possible case scenario. That is the story of the proposal, in 5 words. Now let's talk about something that doesn't always get the attention it deserves in this story. The emotional undercurrent. The thing underneath the logistics and the ring and the garden and the announcement. Taylor Swift has been writing songs about love since she was a teenager. She has processed every relationship through music. She has been praised for it and mocked for it and analyzed for it and celebrated for it. And somewhere in the experience of all of that, the transparency, the exposure, the way her personal life has always been public material, she developed a protective instinct. She got careful. She got private. She built walls. And then she met Travis. And she chose to be open. She chose to show up. She chose to let the world see it. She went to games and sat in suites and wore his number and stood on his Super Bowl field and brought him on her Wembley stage in a Victorian tuxedo. She was present, visible, undefended. And she said something about marriage that gives the proposal story its full context. She said it in October 2025, in an interview with UK radio station Heart Radio, while promoting The Life of a Showgirl. "You would think that I had been the type of person who would have obsessed over the idea of a wedding my whole life, but I actually never thought about what I would ever do or what I would want until I met the person." Read that again. She had never thought about what she would want at a wedding until she met him. For a woman who has been famous since she was 16, who has had every detail of her romantic life scrutinized and theorized about and written about and included in countless magazine cover stories about her love life, she had never actually thought about marriage. Not as a real thing that applied to her specific life. Not as something she was planning toward. Until him. Until the guy with the friendship bracelets and the podcast confession and the sweaty palms in a Kansas garden. That is the emotional truth of the proposal story. The logistics are wonderful. The curtained windows, the podcast cover, the crew building the garden while she recorded, the request for a glass of wine, the garden waiting outside. But the emotional truth is simpler. She had not thought about what she wanted in a wedding until she found the person she wanted to marry. And then everything clicked into place. Now let's go back to the podcast. The New Heights Season 4 premiere. August 13th, 2025. The most viewed episode in the history of the show. Nearly 2 hours of conversation between Taylor Swift and the Kelce brothers, recorded in Travis's home in Leawood, Kansas, while outside the windows a garden was being built. Jason Kelce said he had never been more nervous than during this recording. He knew the episode was important. Taylor Swift on New Heights was going to be a cultural moment regardless, but he also knew his brother. He knew something was different about the energy in the room. He knew Travis had something on his mind. And yet he didn't know it was happening that day. He didn't know about the garden outside. He didn't know about the curtained windows or the crew or the ring waiting somewhere in the house. He was just sitting at a microphone next to his brother, interviewing Taylor Swift, trying to be present and professional and not let his own nerves show. The episode covered everything. Taylor talked about reclaiming her masters, the long, complicated, deeply personal process of re-recording her first 6 albums to take back ownership of her music. She talked about the Eras tour, about what it meant to perform that catalog in that order, about the emotional experience of revisiting 20 years of her life in front of 80,000 people every night. She talked about her relationship with Travis, more openly than she typically allowed herself to be in public. She talked about what it felt like to be known. And she announced The Life of a Showgirl, her 12th studio album. An album that would eventually debut at #1 with record-breaking first-week numbers. An album whose emotional landscape, joy, certainty, the feeling of arriving, was immediately read by fans and critics as a reflection of where she was personally. An album about what life looks like when you have finally found the thing you were looking for. She announced it at Travis Kelce's microphone, in Travis Kelce's house, while Travis Kelce sat across from her thinking about what he was going to say when they went outside. The timing of that, the album about arrival, announced in the home of the person whose presence made the arrival feel real, is the kind of detail that Taylor Swift herself might have written into a song. After the episode wrapped, Jason Kelce would later describe it as incredible. He said it was, by far, our most viewed episode of all time. He said it in the same breath as the season finale, where his brother finally talked about what had been happening in that room on August 13th. The contrast between what Jason knew then, remarkable podcast episode, and what he knows now, his brother was about to propose, gives the whole thing a beautiful before and after quality. You can watch the August 13th episode knowing what you know now, and every moment between Travis and Taylor is lit differently. Every glance, every laugh, every moment where Travis's eyes go somewhere else for just a second. Every moment where Taylor seems to be fully present while Travis is running 2 simultaneous emotional tracks at once. He was planning. The whole time. He was planning. Travis Kelce did something else in the days around the proposal that should be part of this story, because it speaks to the kind of person he is and the kind of relationship he was proposing to make permanent. He got the ring custom made. He worked with a jeweler. He made specific decisions. The old mine brilliant cut, the antique diamond, the gold band, these were not choices made from a display case. These were choices made from knowledge of a person. From knowing what she is drawn to aesthetically, from knowing her relationship with the past, from knowing that she would understand what an antique cut means in the same way she understands what a re-recording means. That these are about honoring history while choosing the future. A man who plays football for a living studied the history of diamond cuts and chose one that was made by hand in a previous century, because it was the right ring for the person he was asking. That is a man who was paying attention. Not just to the famous version of her. To her. Now let's talk about the moment on New Heights this week. Because it is remarkable in its own right, and it is what has brought all of this back into the news cycle. July 8th, 2026. 5 days after Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce got married at Madison Square Garden. The New Heights season finale drops. The episode features Tom Brady as the guest. It was recorded before the wedding. And in it, Travis Kelce talks about the proposal. He talks about the podcast episode. He talks about sitting there, recording with her, planning the whole time. He doesn't talk about the wedding. Not directly. He does not mention Madison Square Garden or the Dior gowns or the Paul McCartney performance or the gold books or the vows. He lets the wedding exist as its own thing, in its own space, outside the podcast world. But he talks about the proposal. He opens a window into the most private moment of the relationship before the wedding. He says, starting it with Taylor, pretty epic. During that recording, the entire time, I'm planning, like, I'm gonna ask this woman to marry me after this. He says the episode is one I'll remember forever. And Jason, who has known his brother his whole life and was in that room on August 13th, agrees that it was incredible. He says it was, by far, our most viewed episode of all time. And in the same conversation, the two brothers who stood at the altar together 5 days ago, Travis with his bride, Jason as his best man, look back at the moment where the engagement that led to that wedding actually began. The podcast. The curtained windows. The garden. The palms sweating. The tears. The moment that was, from Travis Kelce's perspective, the true beginning of everything. And here is what I want you to hold on to from this whole story. Because there is so much noise in the world around Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, so many headlines, so many think pieces, so many cultural analyses and media narratives and hot takes, that it is easy to lose the simple human thing at the center of all of it. A man liked a woman. He tried to give her friendship bracelets backstage at her concert. He got turned away. He told the story on a podcast because he is the kind of person who tells true stories even when they make him look slightly ridiculous. She heard it. She appreciated the honesty of it. They found their way to each other. And then he loved her long enough to know exactly what she would want in a ring. He planned long enough to build a garden while she sat inside recording a podcast. He was brave enough to get down on one knee with sweaty palms and a few tears and say, "Marry me." And she said yes. And then, almost a year later, in a secret garden built inside Madison Square Garden, with gold books and Dior gowns and Stevie Nicks and Paul McCartney, they got married. But it started with sweaty palms in a garden in Kansas. It started with the most human kind of nervousness. The kind that lives in the gap between what you want and whether the person you want will say yes. He wanted her to say yes so badly that his hands were sweating in August. She said yes. And if that isn't the whole story, if that one fact doesn't somehow contain everything you need to know about this relationship, then I don't know what does. The palms were sweating. She said yes. And the rest is the most extraordinary love story in modern American public life. Stay with us. Because this story keeps getting better. But first I want to go somewhere that most coverage of this proposal hasn't gone. I want to go inside the 2 weeks. Because Travis Kelce proposed on August 13th, 2025. And the announcement didn't go public until August 26th. And in between those two dates, 13 days, appropriately, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce were engaged. And nobody knew. Nobody. Not the tabloids. Not the fan accounts that track every movement. Not the industry insiders or the celebrity reporters or the entertainment journalists who have made it their profession to know things about famous people before those famous people are ready to share them. Nobody knew. And this is astonishing on its own terms, because we are talking about the two most famous people in America in 2025. Taylor Swift, whose name generates more Google searches on a regular basis than almost any other human alive. Travis Kelce, whose face appears on screens across the country every Sunday during NFL season, and whose name has been a constant presence in entertainment media since September 2023. Two people who cannot walk through an airport without being photographed, who cannot have dinner at a restaurant without someone posting about it, who cannot change their hair without generating 30 think pieces. And for 13 days, they were engaged. And it was a secret. They walked around with it. They went to sleep with it. They woke up with it. They talked to their families with it. And every time they were near anyone outside their innermost circle, they carried this thing quietly, this enormous thing, this ring and this question answered and this commitment made, and they let the world remain unaware. There is something quietly beautiful about those 13 days. The proposal had been public in the sense that it happened at Travis's house, that a crew set it up, that photos were taken. But the feeling of it, the private experience of being newly engaged, that belonged only to them. For 13 days. And then August 26th arrived. And they posted the carousel of 5 photos. Travis on one knee. Taylor holding his face. the ring visible, the garden around them. And that caption, "Your English teacher and your gym teacher are getting married." The Swiftie community immediately recognized the reference. Your English teacher and your gym teacher is an adaptation of lyrics from Taylor's song, So High School, a track from the Tortured Poets Department album that many fans had interpreted as being about Travis. The lyrics describe a relationship with a jock, someone athletic and physical, someone who makes the narrator feel like a teenager again. Someone who feels like everything she wrote about in high school love songs, but now, finally, real. Taylor Swift confirmed what millions of fans had suspected. This relationship, this man, this love, it made her feel the way she always wrote about love feeling. Young and certain and completely, irreversibly in. The caption was not random. It was a lyrical Easter egg that Taylor planted in public, in a caption on an engagement announcement, telling everyone who understood the reference exactly how she felt about the person she had just agreed to marry. She does this. She has always done this. The layering of meaning, the breadcrumb trail of references, the way she embeds the personal into the public so that it can be simultaneously available to everyone and privately understood by those paying attention. The engagement announcement was a Taylor Swift song in 8 words. About what happened with Jason Kelce during all of this. Because Jason's role in the proposal story is interesting and underexplored, and it tells you something important about how Travis operates. Jason and Travis Kelce are extraordinarily close. They have hosted a podcast together for years. They are public about their brotherly dynamic in a way that is both refreshing and unusual for 2 famous athletes. They rib each other, support each other, disagree with each other on air, and clearly love each other in the way that people who grew up together and stayed close tend to love each other. And yet Travis did not tell Jason the proposal was happening that day. Think about that. The 2 brothers are co-hosting a podcast. Travis knows that as soon as the episode wraps, he is going to ask Taylor Swift to marry him. Jason is sitting right there. And Travis doesn't say, "Hey, by the way, after we finish recording, I'm going to propose." He doesn't tell him. He just lets it happen. And Jason recorded the episode in what he later described as extreme nervousness. Nervous about having Taylor on the show, nervous about the episode going well, completely unaware that the reason for Travis's energy that day was something entirely different from podcast anxiety. This is significant because it tells you something about how carefully Travis compartmentalized the proposal. He could not risk even his brother knowing. Not because he didn't trust Jason, of course he trusted Jason. But because the less information exists, the less chance of a leak. The less chance that Taylor senses something in the room. The less chance that the garden outside gets discovered before they're ready. Travis protected the proposal the way Taylor protected the wedding. Total information control. Nothing outside the essential inner circle. And even inside that circle, information shared only on a need-to-know basis. His brother did not need to know. So his brother didn't know. Until August 26th, when the announcement went live, and Jason presumably called Travis and said something appropriately fraternal and possibly involving some profanity and definitely involving enormous love and maybe a few tears of his own. Taylor on The Tonight Show. October 7th, 2025. Jimmy Fallon's studio. Taylor Swift is promoting The Life of a Showgirl, her 12th album, which has just been released and is already breaking streaming records. She is wearing the ring. And Fallon, being Fallon, asks about the proposal. And she tells the story. She tells it the way she tells all of her stories, with the perfect sense of pacing, with the detail dropped at exactly the right moment, with the understanding that a good story is about timing as much as content. She describes the podcast. She describes how she felt during the recording. She describes the moment it ended. And then, he was like, "Do you want to go and just walk around the backyard and have a glass of wine?" I was like, "I'm always gonna want to do that." The studio audience laughs. Because the obviousness of it, in retrospect, is wonderful. Of course she wanted to go for a walk and have wine. Of course she said yes. It's not a suspicious invitation. It's just an invitation to do something nice. Something simple. And then I realized exactly why all of the windows were curtained and why he was nervous. The audience goes. The audience absolutely goes. Because in that sentence, Taylor Swift has just told you everything about how the proposal felt to experience. The piecing together. The retroactive understanding. The curtains clicking into context. The nervousness she had registered without knowing why. And then, it was the best possible case scenario. She could have said it was perfect. She could have said it was magical. She could have used any of 100 adjectives that would have been accurate and appropriate and would have generated their own headlines. She said, the best possible case scenario, which is the engineering phrase, the logistics phrase, the phrase of someone who was evaluating outcomes and found the actual outcome to be the best one available. It is slightly more intellectual than perfect, and slightly more grounded than magical, and it is, arguably, more romantic than either of them. Because it implies that Taylor Swift, in the moment of the proposal, understood that everything that could have gone right had gone right. That the curtains and the garden and the walk and the wine and the ring and the man on one knee had converged into the best version of a thing she hadn't known she was waiting for. The best possible case scenario. 5 words. A lyric waiting to happen. Now let me tell you something that gets overlooked in most proposal coverage, because the ring and the garden get all the attention, and rightly so. But there is another layer to the proposal story that lives underneath the logistics. Travis Kelce was genuinely, profoundly afraid of something. Not afraid she would say no. Not primarily, anyway. He knew her well enough by August 2025 to know that the relationship was real and reciprocal and heading somewhere permanent. The nervousness, the sweaty palms, the tears, they were not the nervousness of someone who doesn't know the answer. They were the nervousness of someone who loves something so much that the formal act of declaring it feels terrifying. The nervousness of making something that is already real into something official. Of saying out loud and on one knee what has been true for longer than anyone has known it. Every person who has ever proposed to someone they truly love knows this feeling. It is not about the outcome. It is about the moment, the weight of it, the permanence of the question, regardless of the answer. Travis Kelce, in a garden in Kansas in August 2025, felt that weight. The most famous athlete in the most famous relationship of his era felt exactly what any person feels when they are about to make the biggest promise of their life to the person they love most. Terrified. And absolutely certain. Both at the same time. That is what sweaty palms and a few tears look like from the outside. And then he asked. And then she said yes. And then they were giddy, his word, for 13 private days before they told the world. One more thing. One detail that connects the proposal story all the way back to the very beginning, to the friendship bracelets and the failed backstage attempt and the podcast that started it all. On July 8, 2026, Travis Kelce appears on the New Heights season finale. The first episode since the wedding. And he talks about the proposal. He says the podcast episode, the August 13th episode with Taylor, is one I'll remember forever. Not the wedding. Not the proposal itself, exactly. The podcast. The 2 hours of recording. The episode where Taylor announced her album and talked about her tour and sat across from him. While he was mentally somewhere else entirely, running the proposal plan on a loop in the back of his mind. He says that episode is one he'll remember forever. Because that is where, for Travis Kelce, the story lives. Not in the moment of the question, or the ring, or the tears, or the garden. In the moment before. In the 2 hours of sitting with her, knowing what he was about to do, holding the question inside himself, watching her be herself, brilliant and funny and warm and completely unaware of what was waiting outside the curtained windows, and loving her so much that his palms were sweating and his heart was probably trying to escape his chest. He'll remember that forever. Not because it was the best moment of the proposal, but because it was the truest one, the most human one, the moment where all the love was contained, held, waiting, unseen. And then they went outside. And he asked. And the curtained windows made sense. And the garden was there. And the ring was there. And Travis Kelce got down on one knee and looked up at the most famous woman in the world and said the most ordinary and the most extraordinary thing a person can say. Marry me. And she held his face. And she said yes. The palms were sweating. The tears came. And from that garden in Kansas, a straight line runs all the way to Madison Square Garden and purple lights and gold books and Dior gowns and Paul McCartney singing something he hadn't sung in 62 years. A straight line. From the sweat to the vows. From the garden in Leawood to the garden inside the garden. That is the love story. And every detail of it, from the friendship bracelets to the proposal to the just and tea married lights in the rain, was earned. Every single bit of it was earned.